Hello, and welcome to the Spoonie Authors Podcast, a podcast where we explore a different disabled author's stories each week. I'm your host, Diana Gunn, and joining us today is Dylan Madeley. Dylan Madeley is the copy for Auxiliary Magazine and the author of the Gift Night trilogy. His next novel, Alathea, Goddess and Empress, is set to release with a release party at local convention at Astra in May 2020. Hello, Dylan.
Hi.
Why don't we start by saying congratulations on your upcoming release. I'm very excited for you, and hopefully we'll even be at your release party.
It'd be great if you could be there, for sure, yeah.
So tell us a bit more about your novel, Alathea. Alathea? How do I pronounce it?
All right, I pronounce it Alathea.
Oh, so I was wrong on all.
I bet you there's a person who actually has this name who will correct me, but it's the usual author thing where we write it even if we don't know how it's pronounced. Character names, it's wild.
See, it drives me nuts when I can't pronounce a character's name in another book, so I never do that. I always make sure that at the very least I know how to pronounce my characters' names, and I try to make it so that their names are, easy to guess how they're pronounced, but that's really a harder thing to do.
I tend to choose real world names from a baby naming website in which I know the meaning of the name, and then at least you can look it up even if the author's doing it wrong.
That makes sense.
Okay, so you'd like a rundown of the book. Okay.
Yes.
So this next book is a dark fantasy, darker than my other titles at least, and it's about Alathea, and who she is at the beginning of the book is a little girl growing up in the Imperial Palace, so the absolute privilege. But it's really nasty being in an imperial family. I'll just read my write-up and get to it here. Alathea was raised to rule, but the benevolent and deranged forces that hoped to prepare her for the throne may have created a monster. She abruptly emerges from the care of a father whom she loves and fears, only to find that she's torn between her father's reign of empty order through terror and violence and a magical path that could be a complete illusion. She can't really live one exclusive of the other, so she lives both. Her tutor, another main character, major minor, wants to equip her to be better than her father, like more caring and more reasonable and knowledgeable and in control of her own story and the narrative of the empire. But he isn't raising her alone. The saying it takes a village. Well, really, everything going on in a child's life is raising them here, and there are negative influences here, even if they don't intend to be. Alathea's nurse wants to coax her toward a path of enlightenment and faith according to a religious order that her nurse is secretly working for, because her nurse views Alathea as a person who can be saved because she is a child, unlike her dad, who is very violent and angry a lot. But the nurse does not really grasp the plan of her masters or how it might also warp Alathea's life story. Her dad, his name is Maximian, is bent on protecting his daughter. Maximian is the emperor, by the way. He wants to protect his daughter from fanatics who killed her mother and who want to control the empire on their own. But his desire for revenge and to raise her to be a strong, dominant, and ruthless personality really leads him to ignore her emotional needs as a child, and take needless risks in a way that also warps her life story. So overall, with all these influences coming in, it's about her braving them and growing up with all this. It touches on loss, the insatiable hunger for control, the way people live a narrative of themselves, the innocence and danger of dreams. There's a little bit about love, but a lot, being a dark tale, there's a lot more of that deep hatred and rage and how to control it or how to use it. And lastly, the dangers of using conquest to attempt to achieve peace. It's a coming of age tale. Already covered that and that and that. Okay. I believe that covers it. As a beginning point, if you want to ask any questions about it, you know.
So this book is also connected to your Gift Night trilogy, correct?
Oh, it is, because if you have read any of the books out of that series, this is the life story of the primary antagonist of the Gift Night trilogy. So it ties in, but you don't need to have read the Gift Night books. This can be on its own. It just sort of happens over here and then goes neatly into the rest of the series.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And why did you end up deciding to write this story about your antagonist?
That's a very great question, and I believe I've become accidentally trendy, given that we have a Joker movie winning awards, and now a certain young adult author I'm hearing about wants to write about, well, do I even want to go into that? I don't believe so.
That's a whole mess.
That's true.
Mess.
I actually had to ask myself whether I was doing the exact same thing, and the answer is no in my mind. But what to get back to your original question, I viewed Alathea as a character who just happens to be against the other main characters in the original trilogy. So I'm not really telling you a whole lot about her or how a person ends up like that or how maybe they needed to be that way. And I felt like I had come up with this other realm that's not even on the map of the original trilogy that many parts of the tale actually take a place in, but it's not really. I was interested in telling you more about that world and less about Kendrick and Chandra and Derek's people who get all the attention in the original trilogy. It was an untold tale, and it just got me interested as an author and writing it.
What was the most exciting part about working on this book?
I liked the departure because all my published books up until now are about Derek and Chandra. And then they also have to tie into a previous book that had existed, and I have to deal with lots of continuity across a whole series. And, it was nice to put that away. Even though continuity matters here still, it's more contained. It was like a new start. Even if it's not exactly new for me.
That makes sense.
It was relaxing to not have to worry about all that extra baggage.
Yes. A series is a massive undertaking.
Especially if you need,
the longer it gets, the more complicated it all gets.
Yes. Especially if you like or you are drawn to having interwoven complicated plot threads, as I guess I am. So.
Yes, right. I think this is a common affliction among us fantasy writers. We're just drawn to these big, huge plots with all these spinning wheels and all of these characters, and it's so much to keep track of. I mean, George R. R. Martin has like 8 continuity readers. It's crazy. Just and he still can't finish his books. So as an author, and especially as an indie author, you have a pressure on you to be approachable at all times and to make public appearances on a pretty frequent basis, both online and offline. How does this expectation impact you as a disabled author?
Well, very greatly, especially as an independent one. I find actually that it's very rewarding in the end to be appearing in person at book fairs and events, but it does. Okay, my background is that I'm a person living with social performance anxiety, so the public reading part is it's a bit of a personal nightmare, really. That's an understatement. It's I have to learn to manage it, and I do that less often than I used to. But I do feel that it's a needed activity to raise one's profile. And then social interactions. Very big component, especially in marketing as an author, because I've found that it's not enough to run an ad, no matter how nice it looks, if nobody knows who you are. It's very personal. I wanted to say these days, but perhaps it's always been personal. Perhaps just now it's more intimately personal than just having mass media introduce you to people. It's definitely impacts me. I also have to manage my reading of social cues on an interpersonal basis, because I don't have the same natural, well, I don't know if natural is the word. I don't feel a felt sense like many people do of what's a natural, there I go again, response, what's an rather expected response, perhaps is a better word, to situations. I'm a self-diagnosed autistic person as well, so this is a part of my life. It's all necessary. It's just it will have its challenges. That's the easy way to put it.
Absolutely. What are some strategies that you've developed to overcome these challenges and to work around them?
I the very first thing I do is I avoid when it comes to the public work. I try to avoid being alone. Um, if especially if it is a new experience. I like to have volunteers help me out, people I know and trust. I get to know the people around me at a book fair so that I know my immediate neighbors, and I also respect the fact that afterwards, say especially immediately after a public reading, I need to be alone for a few minutes to just to kind of process the experience I have just had. So definitely self-care and not neglecting that, like knowing what my needs are and addressing them.
Yeah, that's absolutely important. And um, so does that mean that you are nervous about this upcoming release party? Are there any things that you're doing specifically to prepare for that? Because I know that's going to be a solo release party, so that's really a big deal for you, right?
Oh, sure. It's a solo release, but I'm not really alone. From my previous experience in 2018 releasing a book, I was surrounded by people I know very well who were helping me out with many of the little details so that I wouldn't have to have my attention pulled in all directions. My mom took care of the snack arrangements, so then that's one less item. I was interviewed by Candace, whom we both know from the writing group, um, and so a person I know and trust is interviewing me. That helps quite a lot, and it was very positive, the atmosphere. Surrounded by people I care about, I had probably the best time being interviewed in public and doing a public reading. I didn't need that much of a recharge versus I've in contrast, when I did a reading in a bar, I had to put up with hecklers. That was the absolute worst, and um, it helps if it's not a completely new experience. If I have expectations that aren't all negative, I look at what's positive.
Absolutely. Reading in a bar, that sounds brave, honestly.
I was invited, as were others. It was very casual. I believe it was just not the environment for what I was reading. It might have
That makes
been
sense.
great for some poetry or a not very long piece,
Yeah.
perhaps. Yeah.
Well, that brings me to a good question. How do you choose what you're going to read at events like these?
Ooh,
How do you pick a piece from a novel and find one that actually stands on its own?
that is a challenge, especially in prior book launches where the material relied on prior books. So I look for a piece that feel would require the least explanation at the entry level, because too much explanation uh, can be a turnoff for certain listeners. It just disrupts them getting into your world. I try to minimize that. So then that rules out many parts of the book, which would actually be wonderful, but would require you to have read the rest or read another piece. So that definitely narrows it down, and the rest is Mm. That's my primary criteria.
Makes sense. So let's bring this back a little bit to disability. So one thing that is really frustrating to a lot of writers is the state of disability representation in current culture. What are your feelings toward that? How would you like to see disability representation change and grow in the coming years?
Huge question. I believe some great progress has been made by the availability of sensitivity readers, and of people using their own voices, and of elevating, upholding people who are telling their own stories. But I feel it's also important to find non-harmful ways of using our imagination and exploring. But it would involve consulting with others more, and it becomes, again, more of a group exercise and less of a lone activity. There's no easy answer, that's for sure. I don't even know where exactly I'm going, but I think it's begun. I think it's begun, at least, and it's a question of where it can go or how we might improve.
Do you think that there are any major disabled characters stories in your writing future?
Yeah, I feel that there has been certain subtle inclusion all the way through, and it always came from taking experiences I have and letting my characters experience them. Derek has the equal penchant that I have to be a little bit not in the now and a little dissociated and really intensely into his own fantasies and thoughts. But I have not really explicitly, I haven't gone deep into that. And I there's lots of room for it, because I have to say that after this book is out, I do not know what's next. So it's a wide open future.
That must be scary and exhilarating all at the same time.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. I don't know what else to add on this topic.
That's totally fair. In that case, I will just wrap up with our final question, which is, where can people find out more about you and your work?
Oh, my website is squareonecomics.com/Dylan Madeley. I don't know if we can include that link anywhere in the podcast link or how we will do this, but that is my website that has a blog, has examples from Auxiliary Magazine of interviews I have done, and links to every book.
Yeah, this will definitely be published on the Spoonie Authors Network blog as
Yes.
well. So show notes will be there with links and a transcription. Hopefully, we are working really hard to make that happen so that it will
Sure.
be more accessible to everyone, because this is really important stuff we're doing. And I want to thank you for joining us.
I just want to add that I'm available. You can find me with an Amazon search. I'm on there, and Kindle Unlimited. My works are on there as well. If you use KU, you can read all my books.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, so thank you for joining us. It has been a real pleasure to chat with you as always, and I hope you have a wonderful evening and a wonderful book release.
Thank you. Thanks for the interview, and I hope to see you there.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Spoonie Authors Podcast. The Spoonie Authors Podcast is part of the Spoonie Authors Network, a community initiative devoted to sharing the stories of disabled authors and educating abled people about what life is like for disabled creatives. Transcripts of this podcast are also available on the Spoonie Authors Network. To learn more or become a contributor, visit spoonieauthorsnetwork.blog. And of course, if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast streaming platform.